Hi, this is Sally Morgan, physical therapist, craniosacral therapist, and Tellington T-Touch practitioner for animals and people. This is Tristan. He's a Corgi, and today we're here for another episode of Conversations with a Corgi, where we're going to continue looking at fascia and the fascial system in the body. And today we're going to continue to talk about what and how happens to fascia when it is not in its maximally happy position. Ooh, my model. It's a little too far to reach with the Corgi. I got it. All right, so as we talked about yesterday, fascia is a continuous sheet that runs throughout your body. It covers and protects and surrounds and supports every single thing in your body. And like, for instance, a muscle is made of tiny little cells that are surrounded by fascia. They're bundled together to make a little group surrounded by fascia, and then a bigger group surrounded by fascia, and then a bigger group surrounded by fascia, until you have a muscle surrounded by fascia, and the two ends of the muscle are fascia as well, on the tendons and ligaments. And you'd like to have an ideal balance of strength and flexibility. And when that is compromised by trauma and dysfunction, you end up with a lame dog or a lame horse or pain or any kind of things that can disrupt your body. It can even trigger a whole series of inflammation events throughout your body. We need fascia to move well, for us to have maximum function, and for our animals to move gracefully and symmetrically and with maximum coordination. We need fascia to be happy. So your body, as we talked about yesterday, if you break your arm, will remold to accommodate changes in the fascia. So if you break your arm and it's held like this for 8 weeks, when you can finally move it again, you can't really move it because the fascia has already started to accommodate the changes in your body. And that's an important thing to keep in mind when we're looking at things that can go wrong with fascia. And remember, it has a memory. I told you the story of my horse and my sister's horse, and how their bodies had a physical memory of the trauma they inflicted on each other, as well as the emotional injury that they inflicted on each other when they had a big fight. And our goal with treating fascia is to restore movement and create maximum health. And of course, I've talked before when we talked about chiropractic that movement is health. Any place you're not moving is a part of your body that is not healthy. So you need maximum mobility in your body to maintain health and happiness. So we talked a little bit yesterday too, and this is a very important thing. We looked at the dog with the muscles. We talked about the directions of the fibers in those muscles. We've got the ones that go up and down, which is vertical throughout the legs, and then throughout the organ systems and parts of the shoulder muscles, the fibers are going horizontally. And this is part of how fascia holds us together. And that is an important thing to look at when we're looking at injuries and problems with fascia. So there are fibers that go longitudinally up and down, and there are fibers that go transversely sideways. And so each different aspect of the body will have more of transverse or longitudinal fibers depending on what the function is for that piece of the body. So how do we have problems develop with our fascia? It's pretty easy to see that trauma of any kind is not going to be good for any part of your body. So we have a bunch of different kinds of fascial trauma that can occur. We have like a macro trauma, which is like a football player being tackled, just massive injuries and trauma to various parts of the body, or even a car accident. We have micro trauma, which is what I have going on here. This is from repetitive motion or using small muscles that are supposed to be maximally movable for things like strength. And that's how I got this injury. So any kind of micro repetitive thing like tapping on your cell phone with your two thumbs can also create that kind of micro trauma. We have the misuse, which is also part of what I have going on in my hand. And that's when you're using a part of your body for something it's not meant to do. And for instance, a lot of people, when they are, especially me, because my collarbones are both broken, when I lift anything, I'm not using the strong muscles of my shoulders and back. I'm using my neck muscles, because these muscles that attach from my neck to my shoulder are starting to take over the stability that is gone because my collarbones are broken. So misuse can really create a lot of tissue restrictions, and I think this is what happens to a lot of people that end up with fibromyalgia because they have different weaknesses or asymmetries. A lot of the people that get this have been very mobile previous to their problems, and so their body just goes into this state of guarding and they are unable to tolerate anything. You can also get tissue restrictions from infection and disease. Just from coughing. When you have pneumonia, you can get all kinds of problems around those tiny muscles around your ribs, and your lungs can become restricted from infection and disease and smoking. Surgery, we all know about any place that you've had a couple of stitches. It just doesn't move as well as other areas of your body. And surgery often has layers of restriction in the tissues. For instance, one of my clients had her gallbladder out, and so she has layers of restriction around where the gallbladder used to be, and then as they cut through the body to get to the gallbladder and take it out, and then there's the scar tissue on the top. Surgery is a pretty invasive thing. But as we talk about in all kinds of modalities, things can be invasive or non-invasive depending on the approach. And for instance, when my friend Dr. Bernie Siegel did surgery on people, he was talking to the body, asking it for help. He was really like holding hands with the organs as he was doing surgery. That's very different from somebody with a big ego coming in there and saying, I'm going to get this damn thing. All that energy goes into your body and can change your surgical outcome. So it's very important that when you have surgery, that you have a surgeon who has a good optimistic attitude and that is trying to work with you to create optimal wellness as opposed to fix you up. So that's an important distinction. So you can have a lot of restrictions from surgery. My gallbladder client came here the minute she was out of the hospital or to my office, and we were able to work on all those restrictions and welcome the organs around the gallbladder to fill in that space and say goodbye to the gallbladder and thank it for helping her for years of good work, minimizing the impact of fats on her body, and that made a big difference in her outcome. And then you can also create tissue restrictions from emotional issues. Car accidents are a really good example of this because as you are having the accident, you are thinking, oh my God, how am I going to get to work? I can't buy a new car. Is my kid safe in the back seat? Where's my dog? That guy ran a stop sign. You might be angry. So there's all kinds of emotions in a car accident. But you can even have emotional changes in your tissue from things like bad news. And this can be, for instance, right now, a lot of corgis I know are crossing the Rainbow Bridge. And in somebody like me who's already had corgis cross the Rainbow Bridge, sometimes this can reignite your old emotional wounds and create even more restrictions when it's not even your direct circumstance that's occurring. So these are all really important kinds of trauma to remember that create restrictions in your body. And again, a lot of people that have fibromyalgia end up continuing to have problems because the emotional impact of their issues has not been addressed. And until those emotions are released, I can't say really cleared, but released, it sometimes is hard for the body to let go of something that is restricting it. You can also have restrictions from fibrous tissue building up. I had a hard fall on my butt when I was run over by a horse, and I had a lot of calcium building up in the muscle back there, and it took years of massage and yoga to kind of clear that so that I had maximum mobility. When you are a horse rider and you have a restriction in the middle of one of your big glutes, it's not a good thing. It can also impact your walking. So you can have fibrous tissue deposition, and I have calcium building up around one of my collarbones, trying to stabilize it, and sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. Any kind of tissue restrictions, again, like I said, holding your arm in one position for weeks on end, or your foot when you break your leg. any kind of change in function. For instance, my neck muscles are trying to do work of more than holding up my 18-pound head and turning it. They're trying to carry things that weigh 30 and 40 pounds, and that change in function creates tissue restrictions because the muscles just can't do what I'm asking them to do. And this is a huge reason why we have athletic trainers and help with bodybuilders and physical therapists and occupational therapists, because people and all animals want to function maximally with what they've got, and we are really good at substituting other muscles for the jobs that some injured or weak muscle can't do, and then we end up with all kinds of problems. So that's how you end up with tissue restrictions in your fascia. The other way that we look at this is like the layers of an onion. So if you imagine an onion with layers and layers around it, and if you draw a circle with concentric circles around it, and then think about little X's where you've had injuries or trauma in your life, those things build up, and they can be happy things like getting married or having a baby or, being asked to do some big event at work that you've been wanting to do, or getting a promotion. And sometimes those things actually are traumatic in a way, because you start to experience emotional things like self-doubt, like, oh, I got that promotion. Oh God, can I do it? Oh, that other person really wanted this job. Are they going to sabotage me? So you get these layers of physical and emotional things that build up in your life. And when you're about 40, you start to have what we call symptoms. And, you can have the exact same trauma, for instance, as your twin, and your symptoms may be very different from the other person's symptoms. It's all how your body copes with it. And your body tries to wall off trauma. So if you, for instance, imagine this is a little toy and it moves in every direction. This is a little way to look at the onion thing in a different way. If you start to put restrictions in here, and trap some of these and, make it so that they can't move as easily because your body is trying to keep you well and get things moving, you can see it's got a little bit of movement one way, almost none this way. But look, it has all of this in this direction. And this kind of thing happens to your fascia. And with different kinds of body work, these little traps can get released, and then you've got maximum mobility again. Another way to look at that is like chewing gum stuck in your hair. I think we're getting to a point where this doesn't happen to so many people as it used to, because we worry about children with teeth and sugar and gum. But remember in the days when you were 5 years old and you fell asleep with your gum in the back seat of the car driving home from the grocery store, and your gum got stuck in your hair and your mother was furious. When you get the gum stuck in your hair, you get like a wad of tissue all built up, like my fingers crossed, like the fascia will do, and then you can't straighten your hair in any direction. So there's a couple of ways to get that out. You can cut it out, which is like surgery. It's very traumatic. You'll have a clump of hair that's shorter than the others, and your whole hairdo will be asymmetrical and not look good. That's exactly what happens to your fascia with surgery. Or you can do other things like freezing it and trying to chip it out. Also traumatic because you can break a lot of the hairs. You can heat it and try to stretch it out a little bit at a time in every direction. And that is the most functional way to release fascia, is to do something where the fibers that are all gummed up, literally like gum in your hair, you can just put a little slow pressure on them for a long period of time, and then they'll straighten out, and then you have that mobility that you've lost when it's all bunched up like gum in your hair. And a lot of the techniques we'll talk about over the next couple of days do different things to try to release those fibers in the fascia and get them lined up in the direction they're supposed to be going. So those are some of the things that happen when you have fascial restrictions, and it can be really devastating for people. I know people that have had Achilles tendon injuries that were really severe, and they end up limping for so long. They have back pain, and they end up having, problems in their foot because the foot's trying to do things it's not supposed to do to accommodate the lack of stability in the Achilles tendon. So you can have all kinds of problems because your fascia is trying its best to help you, but it's got some kind of restriction and it is unable to function as well as it had been able to. So there are many techniques to release restrictions in fascia: craniosacral therapy, myofascial therapy, types of myotherapy, acupuncture, massage, chiropractic, pretty much energy work, shamanic work, pretty much any kind of modality in alternative medicine can release fascial restrictions. But we're going to really focus on the ones that work on the physical restriction. That's like that gum in your hair, like this, where you can't move in any direction. And there are specific bodywork techniques to release those restrictions. And like I said, help those fibers know which direction to go so that they line up in the direction of the fascia that they are, and you get that mobility again. So if I were a leg on a dog or a horse, I would be lining up this way because the fascia runs vertically on legs. So those are just a couple of the ways that you can have problems with your fascia, and these can be long-term issues. An example I often give was I had a pretty good injury in about year 2000. I had a problem with a horse, and I ended up falling on the back of my head. I had a pretty big head injury, went to the white light, all that. And the horse kicked my foot while it was on the ground and broke my talus, which is a big bone that stabilizes your foot, in 25 places at least. It was really just shattered. And it took a while to find it, so there was a lot of other problems that went on for about 48 hours. But that foot injury caused me a lot of problems. And one of the things that happened maybe in the year 2006-ish, and this original injury was 2000, I got a frozen shoulder. I could no longer lift my right arm, and the problem was on my left foot. And I did not really fully understand what the connections of fascia were until I had this injury. So a friend invited me. I was a very high-level yogi before this happened, and I hadn't been going to yoga at all because I had so many physical problems. It was all I could do to get through the day. And my friend invited me to this senior and disabled person yoga class with this wonderful yoga teacher up in Greenfield, Mass. And I went to the class knowing that I could do whatever I want and that this woman would support me. So I sat on the floor, as everyone does in the beginning of those yoga classes. You know, I tried to cross my legs in front of me. I was sitting on a block, and the pain in my foot was agonizing. My foot had lost its ability to do this motion and also this motion. So sitting in that yoga pose with your foot curled under you, your foot has to be curled up and in, and my foot couldn't do either of those things. And I had cushions and pillows and, you know, straps and everything piled around my foot to try to keep it comfortable. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there with a frozen shoulder, and was my shoulder hurting? Not very much. And it was so painful, I couldn't move for the rest of the class. I was afraid to move because it was going to hurt even more than it already did. I couldn't straighten my leg. All I could do was just cock my cheek a little to the right to take a little pressure off of that left foot. I sat there crying for an hour for this yoga class. All these people are standing up, walking around, laying on the floor, doing butterfly and restorative poses. I couldn't move. And at the end of the class, my friend who had brought me and the person teaching, Jeannie, came over and kind of helped me up. And of course, they can't hold my right arm because I got a frozen shoulder. I kind of leaned forward on one of the other women, and then she stood up and straightened me, and I was standing on one leg. And lo and behold, after sitting there for an hour, and remember I told you fascial restrictions need a light force over a long time. So sitting there for an hour with no weight on my foot is pretty much accommodating that. I stood up, and when I went to reach up to get my coat, I used my right arm, and I had not been able to lift it more than this. And I reached right up for my coat and didn't think about it and didn't have any pain. So the fascia was transmitting that tightness in my foot all throughout my body, all the way up to my shoulder, creating a frozen shoulder. And this happens a lot. And people go and get treated for their frozen shoulder, and they do exercises and with the shoulder, and you know, it's a little bit better. But my problem was my foot. And you have to be a physical therapist like me who understands the whole body connection, or a physiatrist, and some good orthopedic doctors around here get this too. But until you see that connection of fascia throughout the whole body, my left foot was as far as you could be from my right shoulder. That diagonal restriction in my foot was so profound, it was pulling on my whole body. And had I not ever gone to this yoga class and continued to do yoga, who knows what that pull would have done to the organs that it passed along the way. My gut, my uterus, my diaphragm muscle, my lungs, my stomach. A lot of the digestive system is going to be across that diagonal, even my heart. And so important that we do whatever we can to keep mobility in our fascia, and yoga is one of the things that you can do to release fascia. So that's just a little example of how important it is to recognize the interconnection of the body, and the primary way it's connected is through fascia, which, as I said yesterday, is a faster way to transmit electricity than even through nerve fibers. So your body is really, the intelligence of the body is really in not just the gut and the brain, but in the fascia. So we'll continue our talk about fascia. I don't know when. It's going to be a kind of a long and complex subject, and tomorrow I'll be at my job as an educator, and Thursday I'll be driving to New Jersey ASAP in the morning to do a couple of clients on the way to leaving for the Pet Expo Friday morning. I don't think I should take the time to do this on Thursday morning because I really have a tight schedule trying to see these clients and drive 5 hours. So we will probably return to this topic next week. I will be back from the expo. I will probably do this again on Monday or Wednesday. So in the meantime, we'll of course do some shows live from the Pet Expo in Timonium, Maryland. And if you haven't checked it out and you live in the area, do look it up. World of Pets Expo in Timonium, Maryland. It is a huge pet expo for every kind of pet: reptiles, dogs, horses. They have minis coming, rabbits, guinea pigs, gerbils, reptiles, birds. There's quite a lot of stuff with birds there. They have diving dog competitions. They have agility competitions. They have obedience competitions. And last year we met a couple of baby corgis and a couple of older corgis. So we are really looking forward to some more corgi fun. I still have room for people to join my Tellington T-Touch workshop, which is focused on older dogs. So far, all the people who have signed up have younger dogs. So we will accommodate whoever comes with whatever their issues are. So please check that out. I will post some more stuff about it over the next couple of days. And we are having tons of rain, which I guess is better than the tons of snow the poor Midwest just endured. Danny out there in South Dakota, she's probably buried. So thanks for joining us today for this episode of Conversations with a Corgi, where we looked at different kinds of fascial restrictions and ways that your fascia can become restricted and why that matters. Are you ready to pack up this? We gotta load stuff in the Buick. My folding wagon came. I'm so happy. That's a critical thing, to get stuff uploaded into this event. And without my truck, I can't bring my regular wagon. Everything has to fold and be portable. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow or Friday and Saturday and Sunday, but we might not be talking about fascia for a few more days. Have a great day, everybody. Stay dry if you're in the Northeast.